So why this focus on controlling inflation, which is fundamentally what the inflation targeting policy framework does? It puts so much emphasis on making sure we control inflation. So I'm going to run through some reasons why inflation is bad, why inflation undermines an economy. First one, if you're a saver in a high inflation economy, it erodes your buying power. It erodes your buying power. If you had $1,000 today and inflation is very, very high, it means a month from now that $1,000 is going to buy a lot less. So it's going to discourage you to save. It's also bad for business because it leads to speculative activity rather than actual production and employment creation. I'll give an example of that. In Zimbabwe, a lot of the manufacturing owners closed down their factories. They said, I'm not going to manufacture things. I would rather close down the factory, sell the equipment, take that capital, and simply trade in foreign exchange on the stock exchange. That means jobs were lost and the economy was producing a lot less. People were using capital to engage in speculative activity as opposed to production because inflation was so high, making production so difficult. It also reduces the focus on productivity. It also reduces the focus on folks saying, we're paying X amount today, why are we paying this much more a month later or 2 months later? That's a focus on productivity. If the prices are changing quickly, it reduces the focus on productivity. Inflation can also lead to social disruption. So when inflation got out of control in Argentina, in Zimbabwe, in Germany, I'll talk about that later, it led to a lot of social and political upheaval in both those countries. Now, the last point I'm going to emphasize is probably the most important one. The people who suffer the most when inflation gets out of control are poor people. It's the poor people. Wealthy people can generally protect themselves. They can hedge themselves against inflation. But poor people, the lady who serves your tea, your coffee, the lady who comes to clean your house, the gentleman who does your garden, they're living from one month to another, and inflation hurts them the most. Now, in South Africa, in most African countries, the overwhelming majority of the populations are poor. So South Africa has adopted this inflation targeting policy framework to protect, one, the most vulnerable members of the population, but also the overwhelming majority of the population.